Hello. In this chapter, we're going to talk about the human experience of work and what do I need to know and do differently. So let's talk about the basic elements. We've talked about user experience, customer experience, and employee experience, or as we prefer to call it, the human experience of work, and where all this came from. But what exactly is it? What exactly is the human-centered is human-centered design? So in all three of these domains, UX, CX, and EX, one of the key elements that where it starts is really around doing field research, understanding where the users are, where the people are, what works, how does it work, what's going on for them, what's the context, how does the habitat or the environment where they're working impact the work that they're doing. We really like to work as a product team. So I'll give you an example of a product team. A few years ago, I worked with SC Johnson, a product company, and they're known for Windex and Ziploc bags and household things, household cleaning. And they talked about their household cleaning product team in Europe going to Spain and going into people's apartments, being invited in, and looking at the context, that environment, that home environment, what's going on for them as they're cleaning. What kinds of surfaces do they have? Who's living in that household? How do they use the surfaces or the places like the sinks or the bathrooms where they are? And they had in that product team everybody who is involved in the design and research of that product. So the packaging people, the compliance people, the marketing people, the deliveries. Is it a spray bottle? Is it a wipe? What is the delivery method? The representatives from those people in this small team. So about 5 or 6 people acted as that product team. And they did everything in this field research all the way up to developing a prototype for that product. So it starts with field research and understanding what works. Second of all, what we do is we try to synthesize that information. We visualize it in journey or experience maps where we look at the pain points and we look at the problems to solve or the goals that people are trying to achieve. We look at that context again and we prioritize their moments that matter. So we get to KPIs and a prioritization or a hierarchy of data. And this helps us with the starting point for designing new experiences. Lastly, we do prototyping, testing, and launching. So these same product teams, or this same product team that's been there since the beginning, starts to develop new iterations, more complete at each stage of that product. So in the first stage, they're doing a paper prototype. In the second stage, it might be a wireframe of a digital tool or something that shows how that models how it works. In the third phase, it's almost ready for launch. It's something that they can put out there in the field and get results back from it. The cool thing about all this, most people, when they have a first view of these elements, is they think, this involves more time, more people, more resources. On the contrary, the way this is done is very quickly, actually faster than what we're used to doing. So when we do field research, as I'll explain in a minute, in another part of this, we can involve smaller groups and do this in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. We can map the journeys at the end of that period or as we go. So the wrap-up time for completing a journey with all of that information could be, let's say, 2-3 weeks max. The prototyping, testing, and launching could also be a matter of weeks. So, and what we do is we break it down as we understand the thing that we're trying to solve. We break it down to its simplest elements so that the things which have higher priorities, those are the things we get out faster. So in our traditional way of working, we have the entire design. We don't launch a performance management process until everything has been figured out, and that can take months. Whereas with this, we can focus on one particular thing, like with the performance appraisal time. And we worked with a company a few weeks ago on this, on just improving that time around the performance review discussion, and created a prototype in a matter of days. I've done this many, many times with companies where on this particular topic, we've been able to come up with a solution in less than a week or two. So it's all about speed, getting the right people together to make those decisions, doing that research together, and understanding the context and the problems to solve before we get into solutioning. So there are 3 elements that the playbook or toolkit is built on. So I've talked about human-centered design. That's really core to this. And the goal of human-centered design is to take the perspective of the user. And as I mentioned, we want to make sure that we're identifying the right problems. So human-centered design involves a couple of different disciplines. It involves design thinking, user experience, service design. There's some slight differences in each of these. So design thinking looks at taking the user perspective. User experience looks at interfaces. Service design looks at the systemic connections of all of these and all the people and processes and systems involved, etc. But they all work very similarly, where they have these, this is called a double diamond approach, where you've got a discovery, define, develop, and then deliver. So in each one of these stages, a diamond is opening up on the front end, taking in new insights and new understanding. On the back end of the diamond, the forward part, it's synthesizing, making decisions about that. And then you can iterate as many times as you need to until you are sure that you understand the problem to solve. Once you understand the problem, then you can go into ideation and develop your new product and then start to prototype and test it. So again, opening up for new ideas, new designs, and then synthesizing and making decisions and getting this out quickly to your market. Those are the basic concepts about human-centered design. Analytics, as it is involved with this, is really both qualitative and quantitative, as we shall see. So our goal within analytics is really to understand insights, or why do people do what we do. This is often missing in our discovery and our design of new products. So and then the third thing is really borrowing some agile methodology. So again, working in these smaller product teams. So an onboarding product team, for example, can involve people from facilities, IT, talent acquisition, digital, etc. So physical, digital workspace. And our goal in that product team is to ideate and prototype and test new solutions together. So prototyping, we like to say, is just more research. Now, here's the great thing. If we understand the problem we need to solve, we can start with prototyping. So I'll share some examples of that a bit later. Putting all of this together, we get what we call the HX Playbook and Toolkit. Now you'll see I've added another diamond there because what we really want to encourage and encompass is that we want to understand at the beginning how are people currently experiencing work. And in this first diamond or phase, what we're doing here is really doing some deep listening and exploring and trying to understand. We start with existing data. So looking at surveys, at help desks, at service tickets, at interviews, whatever data we have, both quantitative and qualitative. I'll talk about data in a minute. And we start to segment those into different users. I'll talk about personas and how those work. Then in this middle, and we can ideate and add more information if we feel, because a lot of times when we do exploratory research, we discover new questions we want to ask. So this is really great stuff. I'm excited for you all to learn how this works. In this middle phase, we map this, we synthesize this. So if you've seen a journey map or an experience map, we put all this together and say, what's the storyline of this person in this journey? How are they experiencing this now? So we have an as-is map, and we understand the actions that they go through. So for example, first day of work, how did they arrive at work? What greeted them when they greeted them when they entered the office? When they went to their workspace, what was that like? When they met their boss or the team for the first time and started to connect with stakeholders, what did that day look like for them? And then we understand within that the moments that matter, the key touch points, the things that have greatest impact for those people. So the priorities of that. A map puts that all together in one place so that we can use it and refer to it again and again. And then in this third phase, we do our ideation, our prototyping, and our testing. We focus on the key priorities. Our goal is to really take moments that matter and turn them into wow moments, and really up the impact that we can have on people and really support them in their work as a team with all of the systems and processes that we have. That is the HX Playbook and Toolkit. So let's go a little bit deeper into how all of this works. I've mentioned service design, and I'm really excited for all of you to learn more about this methodology, this way of working, because this is something I think that is really perfect for organizations in the way we are. All of us are familiar with the stage and theater, and we recognize that you have the actors and the props and the people that are out in front of the curtain. These are the people that are what we call front stage. And then we can have actors that are waiting behind the curtain, as well as people that are doing props and lighting and sound. Those people are also delivering the experience, but they're doing it out of our view. So we have same thing in organizations. The actions that we do that come in direct contact with people, with employees and colleagues, these are the front stage actions. Anything that we do that is not in direct contact with them is considered to be backstage. We include all of this on our map so that we can look at it systemically. And we do this with all the processes, the systems, the artifacts that are needed to perform the service or product successfully. So these are what we call the props. And this planning and setup of all of this is the infrastructure, the components of it. That's really, all of this is really part of service design. All right, here's a diagram that looks at how we do service design research. I'll explain a little bit more of this as we go. But what this is saying at the beginning is we take existing research and we analyze it. We look at what we have. We make some decisions about whether we want to do exploratory or confirmatory research. We understand we start with a basic design brief or question, like how can we improve the performance appraisal process, or how can we improve the experience of the first day of onboarding, or something simple like that. And we look at the data that helps us, that we have in existence, and we do our research planning. We say, where do we want to go out? Where do we want to do all of this? And how do we want to collect? Who's going to be involved in the collection of this? How many people do we want to talk to? Again, the emphasis here is about speed and doing this quickly so we can get things moving. I'll explain in a few minutes one of the key differences about this research that enables us to do this quickly. We do visualization in terms of research walls and personas and creating journey maps and experience maps, all to get key insights and a starting point for our design. Why do we do research? So let me illustrate this with a story. A few weeks ago, I had bought a new light for our front entry. This was a glass light. It had a couple of light bulbs in it. And I realized that the light wasn't strong enough. I needed to change the light bulb. So I climbed up on a tall ladder. And as I removed the second screw from this light fixture, all of a sudden I realized it was all coming apart in about 4 pieces. And I was holding the light bulb in one hand, and with the other hand, I was trying to balance 4 pieces, including a large glass globe. And I'm about 2 meters or 7 feet off above the floor. So in that moment, I thought to myself, I wonder if the person who designed this light has ever actually had to change a light bulb in his or her own light. And so think about the things that we're trying to do here in research. We're trying to understand the problems that people are trying to solve, and we're also trying to understand the context, the environment, and how it feels for them, see the world through their perspective, and how it is to use our products. I'm sure all of us have had a moment, especially with digital tools, looking at where we've looked at a screen of something and thought, I don't understand how this is supposed to work. So what are some examples? Think for a moment of things that have frustrated you at work where you wish the designer could see what you were experiencing. That's really what we're trying to do here with research. And most importantly, we're trying to identify the problems that we want to solve, that need to be solved, before we jump into solutions. We waste so much time and money in companies because we jump into solutioning before we've identified the problem to solve. So I want to talk about how we do collection of insights. First, to understand a couple of terms that we use. Tools are things that we use, that the what of the things we use. They're concrete models, a persona, a journey map, a system map. That's a tool. So a way of structuring, visualizing that, or even those are things that are tools. Methods are how we create or gather the information for those tools. They're methods or activities that we engage in. So conducting research, doing co-creative workshops, that's a methodology. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we need to decide up front whether we're doing exploratory or confirmatory research. So exploratory is more when we want to learn about something specific. We want to start with no assumptions at all, and we're answering why questions. If we're doing confirmatory research, then it's validating a specific assumption that we have and testing it through research. We also have two main kinds of research. This is, I think, a really interesting and different kind of characteristic of human-centered design, that we use both qualitative and quantitative. So within this, these are some examples of quantitative. So surveys, big data, doing heat maps, things like this. These are quantitative, numerical-based types of research. Qualitative is understanding more of the context. It's observing people, it's working alongside them. I'll share some examples coming up. This is what I want you to take away from this. When do we do one versus the other? And I would really encourage you to use qualitative to get the actionable insights, to know what questions you want to ask for your quantitative surveys, and then use those to monitor key performance indicators or OKRs over time. So start with the qualitative and then go to quantitative. Here's an example. So this comes from remote and hybrid work in the last couple of years. If we were to do a quantitative survey about remote or hybrid work, we would survey 1,000 people or 10,000 people. Our goal is validation. So we want to understand and survey many thousands of people. So let's take an example, hybrid work. Rank in order of importance these 5 things. And we ask people to rank them for us. What's the problem with that? What if my thing isn't one of those 5? What if you've missed what's most important to me? We've assumed that we know what's most important, that these are the 5 things, and now we're asking people to put them in order for us. Where what we should be doing is to do qualitative interviews. You could interview 10 people or 20 people, a smaller group of people, and get 100 insights. Talk to them about their day working remote. Talk about their day working in the office. What's the difference between those two? What are the situations where they need to work as a team? So it's more qualitative types of insights. So hybrid work questions would be something like, tell me about a typical day. How does it start? Who's with you? What are the things that you're doing in that day? What matters most to you? How and where do you do your best work? And understanding the priorities and the context. And then use those 100 insights to construct a quantitative survey. Now we've identified the things that are most important. Now we can put them into a quantitative survey. So it's about insights over truth. And here's the thing that's really interesting about it. I know most of us are used to validity. I think it's scary to talk to 10 or 20 people and say, these are the inferences that we would make across the population. Let me give you an example for how this works. If 10 people look at a manhole cover and describe it the same way, this is a manhole cover, it's round, it's got these markings on it. If they describe it all the same way, we have what we call data saturation. We don't need to have 100 people look at that manhole cover. It won't add any new insights to that. So that's one of the ways that we know that we've got to a saturation point where we can make a conclusion and move on. So in that situation, interviewing a smaller group of people can be perfect if we see very clear patterns. If the patterns are not clear, then we widen that circle until the observations really come in line. But and as you can see, the amount of time that would take to involve 10 or 20 people in a study versus 1,000 with a big survey company, the time and money that involved is much, much less. Let me give you another example with engagement questions versus experience questions. So I'll use a couple of questions for Gallup. When we were working with a company a few months ago, they talked to us about how they had used their Gallup survey questions to redesign the development process at their company. We asked them, how do you do that? Because if I look at these two questions, in the last 6 months, someone talked to me about my progress. Rate that on a scale of 1 to 5. Or in the last year, I've had opportunities at work to learn and grow. Where in that are the insights that I need to have confidence that I'm focusing on the right problems for improvement? They're not there. They're entirely missing. Let me give you an example of how we might understand this same situation using qualitative questions with human-centered design. So these are some sample questions we could ask. Tell me about a time when your manager talked to you about development, or a time when you were interested or needed to learn something new. What was going on for you? What started that for you? What was the context for that? What was the goal or outcome that you wanted to achieve, or the problem that you were trying to solve? What was most challenging for you in working for development opportunities? Where did you turn for support and information? And what has been most useful? Who or what has helped you the most? And out of your entire experience, what are the things that mattered the most? And why was that so important or so helpful for you? The answers to these questions are going to give us far more insights, useful insights for solutioning than these questions over here. So again, start with your qualitative questions, have them help you define what you want to ask in your quantitative, but use both. Let's talk a little bit about research methods. One of the most important starting points for all of this is understanding that we all come with biases. We all have different ways of filtering information and looking at information based on our experience, based on a number of factors. So our goal in research is to design it in such a way that we don't make assumptions based on our bias. This is challenging for us because we're HR experts. We're the people who are hired and put into these roles because we should know how this is supposed to work. But we still bring assumptions and biases into this. And if we're not careful in how we check those, we can end up really going down the wrong path. So how do we overcome bias? The simplest way is to vary their approach to the people that we study, the people involved in our research team, and the methods in which we use. So if we vary in our team going out to collect research, we talk to more than one person in our research target pool, and we vary the collection method. We call this triangulation. So if we could use 3 different types of methods, at least 3 different researchers and at least 3 different target groups to study, then we can be more sure that we're getting the right data insights. Some examples of qualitative research. So contextual interviews. I gave an example of those a moment ago with the development journey. Tell me about a time when you needed to learn something different, or when you wanted to take on a new role or understand or develop a new skill. Who or what helped you the most? What was going on for you? So those are contextual interviews. Autoethnography means we go out and try it ourselves. Try your app, try your help desk, try your own solution and see how it works for you. Mobile ethnography means we can take pictures, we can take videos of people using the product or service or process that we've designed. We can observe them without speaking, just get permission to go in and watch how they use screens, watch how they get help, watch how they interact in a learning class if we're talking about a learning journey, and just observe quietly. we can be part of that group and understand how it works and then talk to them as they go through. Another way is we can work alongside them. And so it's a mix of this autoethnography and the participant observation. Doing a co-creative workshop, inviting people in and having them describe a day or a week of their work or their use of a particular product or service that we have and mapping that journey, that's a co-creative workshop. On the quantitative side, we all know these well. So there's surveys, help desk tickets, these types of things, customer user data. How are people using the system? Where do they stop? How many people move along are using the system in day one versus week one, etc. So looking at how they use the systems or tools that we have. And then making sense of all of this, we take all of this data, we interpret it, we start to put it into narratives, and we can show you how this works. And then we visualize it in system maps, in personas, in journey maps. This is an example of a persona. This is a real life example of a persona from the company AkzoNobel. They created 3 personas around their learning experience. What do you notice when you look at this persona? A couple of things that I see are that they've mapped them according to their needs, their wants, their likes, and their dislikes. So this person is even looking at motivations. So they like being recognized by their colleagues, being able to put the learning into practice and share content on social media. Those are things that motivate somebody. So their motivations and behaviors, how they currently use our system or learning tools that we have, where they learn from, and how they share it. So this is even unique to this persona. A persona is an archetype. It represents a segment of our audience and how they behave, their preferences, and things like that. And you also have some demographics. This person is probably around 35 plus. They have this much experience, and they have even a statement that kind of typifies. So going out and talking to people and grouping these into personas, they've come up with a quote that typifies this persona. So they're really a constant learner, and digital learning is one of the key things that helps them improve personally and professionally. So we hear often of demographic personas, and I talk to companies all the time who say, oh, we have a manager persona, we have an individual contributor persona. Demographics make a very, very poor persona. Personas are used for helping us know who it is we're designing for. What are their preferences, their behaviors, their motivations? These are far more interesting and useful than demographics. I'll give you a reason why demographics are actually a poor reason. If we took 2 people that were both born in 1948, grew up in the UK, married twice, both have children, both are successful, rich, and famous, and they take vacations in the Alps, and both of them like dogs. So we could say that this describes King Charles. Well, it also happens to describe this person, Ozzy Osbourne. These 2 are what we call persona twins, at least demographically. So if we're designing for these demographics, who is it that we're designing for of these 2? That's the problem. So demographics are not the focus of our personas. Here's an example of a journey map. So this is, we worked with people in 24 different locations in the pandemic a couple of years ago, looking at their typical day of remote work, and came up with this map. So what do you notice when you look at this map? You see all the actions that they go throughout the typical day. We've identified these actions in different stages. So at this stage, these actions represent getting myself ready for work. These actions here talk about, well, I'm making sure my kids are ready for school. I'm dressing and feeding the kids. I'm preparing son's lunch. These are getting others ready. And then here they're starting officially their work day. And they're answering questions, working with their team, sending a presentation. The middle of the day is also busy, so busy that they're eating lunch over the sink and they've got kids asking for help. So a lot of things here. One of the things that is you notice when you do mapping, and I mentioned this is holistic, is that you see everything. You see all of the life that people bring to work and all the work that people bring to life, the things that are happening in context around them, which are so important for us to understand what impacts this experience that they're having. We also map in here the gains and the pains at each stage of the day. And we also look at and ask for to have them help us understand what's the goal or outcome that they want to have at each phase. So here at the beginning of the day, and we get them to phrase it often in a question because this really helps us later on with ideation and designing new products. The goal here is how can I start being organized? Or how can I make sure that my kids are successful? This is another goal. And then we see here in yellow these little fractions. The first number is how well did that experience go for me on a scale of 5? The second number is how important was it to me? So we get a fraction, 3 out of 4, 2 out of 5. And then these red dots are them voting for their moments that matter. We give them several opportunities to vote. And between these fractions or numbers here and the moments that matter, we start to understand where's the priority for their day. So how to ensure I'm aligned? This experience was a 4 out of scale of 5. That's something that's not so necessary. Or how can I set boundaries and be available? That one is a bit closer to expectation. So apparently this group at least is feeling successful in that. That means we can focus our time away from this. Maybe this is something we need to address later, but the things that we need to address most urgently are these here that have the big gaps and the moments that matter. So putting all this in one picture like this and being able to visualize everything that is going on for a person in a typical workday, and then we map the front and backstage actions. What are we doing as an organization? What are the tools or the intranet, the Zoom meetings that they're having and the support for those? And what are people doing behind the scenes to support what's going on? As we map those out as a system or another set of activities, we can start to see how well the things that we're doing support or don't support these key moments. That's the value of putting this all together in a map. When we put the front stage and backstage actions together with this, it's actually something we call a service blueprint. So journey map is what you see here. A service blueprint is mapping all the front and backstage processes and tools. So once we understand and define the priorities, then we can move into ideation and prototyping. I'm going to skip ideation today because I think we understand that well enough, but I want to spend some time on prototyping. Prototyping is also research. Prototyping has been with us since the beginning of time. Many of you may have seen the Duomo in Florence, this beautiful church with this large cupola, which for a couple of centuries was the largest dome in the world. Well, before they built it, they built a scale model of several meters high where they could go inside it as a construction and engineering and architect team and say, how are we going to do this? What materials do we need? And what kind of scaffolding are we going to use? And how are we going to lift things up to that height? And how many people do we need to be involved? So all of that could be planned out. Creating that physical prototype was essential in helping them to design that and build that dome. Here's a prototype for an Amazon driver wearing a VR headset to see how are they going to load and unload packages in their new delivery van. Here's a delivery van being created with a 3D printer. So a lot of different uses and examples of prototypes. Sometimes we need good field research, but sometimes when we've understood the problem to solve, we can move ahead. So example of that, ABN AMRO, a big bank in the Netherlands, noticed that they had limited restroom facilities for women, 80% of their headquarters staff. And on each floor of their headquarters, they had 4 restrooms, 2 for men, 2 for women. So This was an easily identifiable problem. They converted one of the restrooms from men's to women's on each floor. Problem solved. Another example, also in the Netherlands, but they noticed that people were confused and sometimes ended up with illegitimate taxi drivers, and so people were getting lost on finding their transportation. So putting a simple sign on the floor saying this is where you go to get your real taxi, solved. So prototyping is really underrated. We don't do nearly enough prototyping. Look at sports or other areas of human activity where we do practice and scrimmage and set up things and do rehearsals and things like that. We don't do nearly enough of that in business. Here's some examples of prototyping. So creating a future state journey map. So once we've understood the priorities, let's map it out with a to-be journey, the way that would address the things that people identified for us. Using a desktop walkthrough, especially where we have a physical area like a train station or an entry point or an office space, these are ways of showing how the movement of people and things like that, or setting up an event. These are especially helpful for those situations. Most people in digital understand a wireframe dummy. So if we want to have those of us who are designing a process like performance management, we want to put it up on a company intranet. How do we want that to look like? What are the elements on the screen? What are the buttons people need to push? So all of this is part of that wireframe dummy. A physical prototype, here's in our colleagues who do service design doing one of them sitting inside a cardboard cutout of a bus stop that they created with all of the maps and information and schedules and even the flow of people coming by. So physical prototypes are extremely useful where you have a physical deliverable that you're going to create. Business model is a way of looking at how you're going to monetize this. Who are my partners in this? What are the needs of the end user? So putting this all together on one map so that we can understand all of the key elements and contingencies. This is a picture again from our service design colleagues who had designed the entire experience of the first class cabin for Lufthansa. So if you have a lunchroom, if you have a new workspace, if you have anything that's physical that involves moving people around or people using physical things, this is a great way of prototyping and working out how all of this is going to work before you build the final product. So how all this looks like in a boot camp. How would you learn all of this in a short time? We're very happy to share this with you in a 20-hour boot camp. And this can be done in 1 week. It can be done broken up into 2 parts where you have a section of time in between to do research and gathering information. But the average, a good amount of time for doing a boot camp is about 20 hours. And we follow this process, this playbook, from end to end. And we take an actual problem, like how to improve the performance appraisal conversation, or how to improve the experience of the first week of work, or how to improve the internal candidate experience. So these are data focus points for a boot camp. So with L'Oreal, their USA People Experience Ambassadors Bootcamp, we did this in person over 3 days. And the focus point for them was how to improve the experience of people who are moving from one part of the company to another. L'Oreal does a lot of what they call cross-boarding, or movement of people between different assignments. So on day 1, what they did was we started with existing data. Bring everything you have from surveys, from interviews, from help desks, from wherever. And we looked at that data and we structured it. We started to organize that into empathy maps and persona maps and some early narratives of what is the story and the problems that people are trying to solve. And on day 2, we brought in actual colleagues who had gone through recently an onboarding experience. This is typical what we do. is we bring in live colleagues to talk about the experience they've had. And in day one, we've modeled how we want to do this, and we've even taught the people how to facilitate it. So they do the facilitation, they do a mapping exercise, and they map the colleague journey. So you see 2 of the 4 teams here. They have 4 breakout teams. So we get multiple insights with 4 journey maps or 5 journey maps in a boot camp. We get multiple insights. And again, we get to look at the actions, the pains and gains, the goals, rating of touch points, and moments that matter. So the priorities for people doing a cross-boarding experience. And on day 3, they did ideation and prototyping. So they took these main ideas, started developing some prototypes. We taught them a way of evaluating which one do they want to put first in a backlog. And then that final one they developed further as a something they wanted to launch. And they pitched it again to all of these colleagues had gone through the cross-boarding journey. So there are about 20 of them and about 30 people here in the room who are the colleagues learning how to do all these tools and learning the facilitation of this. Had a lot of fun. They had actually a workable prototype for each team and something that had been tested already, ready to try out and use. And everybody got a certification on over 25 different tools and methods from the HX Playbook. So this is an example of a boot camp. So in the boot camp, they learn all of these tools and methods from the HX Playbook and toolkit, how to apply them. And they also get with us a 1-pager for each one of these that shows how they can use these and replicate that in their own work. So facilitation guide for all of the tools in the toolkit. And they get the presentation deck, all the recordings. They also get a link to their own online map. So they've mapped all this. They have all the data on this map. Now that sets them up for success and continuing that forward so they can complete the redesign of that journey. They also, when you get a boot camp, when you do a boot camp, if it's an open enrollment one, especially, you get to know a new network of people also working on the human experience of work. All right. So where you can find a boot camp like this. We're going to have our next open enrollment boot camp on January 8th through the 12th from 8 to 12 Eastern each day. That's 12 to 4 p.m. Central European time. And it's good for these people. If you are a CHRO or another senior HR leader that wants to sponsor and know how to lead this work but needs to understand how it works, this would be great for you. Especially if you're in transition and you have that time and you want to learn new tools and maybe start this in your next job. It's also very useful if you're head of employee experience or people experience to understand how all these tools work. Most people who are doing this role have started pretty recently, and most of you don't have the toolkit yet. This will give you a quick access to a playbook with tools that you can use. People in transition, as I mentioned, and also consultants who want to learn some new tools in this fast-growing space where there's a lot of opportunity and need, frankly, for people to understand all of this. So here's where you can get some more information. You look at our website at hxwise.com and look for courses and programs in the HX Champions Bootcamp. All right, in our next chapter, we'll talk about what are some good examples of how the human experience of work is being applied.